Four Iowa Hawkeyes go in the first round of the NFL draft. Who's going to make the biggest impact? Who's got a chance to break into the lineup right away? We break it all down today. Plus, those undrafted free agents. Who's got the best chance to stick? Plus, little Iowa baseball after a split over the weekend against Penn State. A busy day on Locked On Hawkeyes.
Our Locked On Hawkeyes, your daily podcast on the Iowa Hawkeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, welcome in. I'm Trent Condon, and this is the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. Starting things off with a recap of what we saw over the weekend. I was in Kansas City for the opening round of the NFL draft, and what a just incredible environment that they put together there. I've been to Kansas City plenty of times and never been in the Union Station area, though, at least right where the draft was set up. And what a scene that it was. Just an absolute picture-perfect venue for an event like that. Of course, he had the ability for the people up close. I talked to some people that, yes, got those tickets up close or had the opportunity to purchase them at $2,500 a pop. Not exactly for me. Didn't need to be that close to the action. We were way back there, but I'll tell you, even being way back, just being part of that environment, how cool it was. The beers were flowing, $13 at a time, but we had a great time in Kansas City. And of course, got to see two Hawkeyes off the board to get things started. So we're going to run through the prospects today, talk about each of the four guys that were drafted, their positions, what it's going to look like, their opportunity to stick. This is such a big part of Iowa football fandom. You don't have to be a big NFL fan to be somebody that can be enamored with the NFL and not have an individual team. Now, most everybody does have their team that they root for. I understand that, but it's just so cool on a Sunday to flip on a random game. You might be stuck with something that doesn't have a whole lot of rooting interest for you, but more times than not, you're going to have a Hawkeye out there. And that continues here with the four guys that were drafted, three guys that'll have an opportunity at minimum in the undrafted venue, making their way to camp and possibly making a roster. So we're going to talk about all those prospects. Also got to get into a little baseball here today, but I'm a big fan of the NFL. College football is always number one for me when it comes to my football fandom. And it's not just the Iowa perspective of it. It's everything. I like the pageantry. I like everything that goes along with the college experience, the difference that you see in the game where, the NFL is pretty cookie cutter. Yeah, there has been an evolution. There's been changes, but ultimately you have a quarterback. If you got a quarterback, you got a chance. In college, you can do things a little bit differently. And well, obviously we've seen that at the University of Iowa with some okay quarterback play throughout the years, but nothing at elite level and all the success that the Hawkeyes have had. So let's kick things off at the top pick for the Iowa perspective. And that, of course, is Lukas Van Ness. No surprise that Van Ness went off the board. And when we went through and pre-draft, went through my predictions, I had him going at number 9 to the Bears. The Bears traded down a pick to number 10, ultimately took an offensive tackle with that pick. He ends up, though, going in the NFC North and going to the Green Bay Packers. So this one's really intriguing for Van Ness. Of course, you have the component of exactly how he fits in a 3-4 scheme. That's a transition, going from the 4-3 to a 3-4. Now, he's already a big guy. All right, we've talked about his physicality, the way that he is just physically put together. Looks like Hercules. That was his nickname in the locker room early on in his tenure at the University of Iowa. So you have that component with Van Ness. The other component, though, with him, a lot of people talk about the pass rush and just how good he is off the edge, the speed, along with the punch that he has, doing those kind of things. So most people believe that he's going to be a 5 technique in the 3-4 that the Packers run. Now, possibly he can move inside, but the 5 technique is an outside linebacker, not an outside linebacker as maybe you think of it in the Iowa scheme. Yeah, that wouldn't make a whole lot of sense. In a 3-4, it is different, and he'll be playing the 5 technique at least early on. And if he gets bigger, if he still adds to that frame and puts on another 15 pounds, maybe he becomes a defensive end in the 3-4. But I think it makes a whole lot of sense for him starting out in that route. He's going to be able to get to the quarterback. I don't think there's any problem with that. And really a high upside guy. We continue to talk about Lukas Van Ness being that high impact player early on in his tenure when you keep it simple, when it is simply be a pass rusher, do these types of things. Now, he also is going to have to work on having a few more moves in his repertoire. There's got to be a little bit more than just the power guy that he had that spin move from time to time. He's going to add more to the game in order to get to that highest level. And an absolute perfect Packers pick, right? Now, one thing I pondered. He grew up a Bears fan. Growing up a Bears fan, yes, you're getting paid, you're going there, but just how odd it's got to be, especially, and I don't know how hardcore of a Bears fan Lucas Van Ness was, but I mean, just got to be a little bit weird. I understand it's business. You're playing football. You don't care about the other team, but maybe the first time he plays the Bears, I don't know. Maybe that's just my stupid Bears fandom starting to peek through there. But I am betting on Lucas Van Ness. I think he is more of a developmental guy. His best football still in front of him. We've talked about that in the past, but every day or certainly know that I like what Van Ness is. I know what his upside can be, and he can ultimately become an elite level pass rusher in this league. I think there's that kind of upside. Then we go to one of the first surprise of the NFL draft. Now, a bigger one might have come at number 12 with the Detroit Lions as they went out and got Gibbs, the running back from Alabama. A little bit of a misnomer, too. In today's day and age, he is a perfect complement, elite level speed, but what he does as a pass catcher, I think is going to be very good for the Lions. But they got another pick. They're sitting at 18, and what happens? They make the call. Jack Campbell. Of course, Dan Campbell, the head coach there, he loves tough guys, right? And you're not going to find a tougher guy to play in the middle of your defense than what you're going to get with Jack Campbell. He is a day one starter. He is going to go in there. People continually talked about the Lions. Did they miss on this pick because they could have got him later? And I completely get that. I understand some of the trepidation out there and wanting to get value, right? You want to have that value. If you can get a guy at 28, you don't want to take him at 18. Completely understand it. Here's a problem. Got to have teams that are willing to move up. You have to have teams that are willing to take those phone calls and do those kind of things. And if nobody's willing, you take the guy that you want. And there was no doubt about it. The Lions absolutely positively wanted Jack Campbell. We know what he is as a football player. He is an elite level athlete with huge size, 6'5", 249 pounds. What you wonder is how it's going to translate in the passing game. We've seen guys like Fred Warner in the middle be able to get great depth at that middle linebacker spot, and that makes them impactful, not just as a run stuffer and doing the things that we've all remembered middle linebackers being able to do. Going back to way back in the day, we're talking about Dick Butkus and company all the way to today. That's what your middle linebacker does in the run game. The pass game, though, as it's evolved in the NFL, you got to be able to do both. And with the size, with the speed, I think that Jack Campbell has a chance to be not just good, elite. I believe Jack Campbell is going to be a multi-time Pro Bowler. I think he's going to be an All-Pro. I think he has a chance, if he stays healthy, to be a guy that we are talking about for a long, long time. The Lions are on the come. They are the betting choice right now at FanDuel to win the NFC North. They are one of the betting favorites to win the NFC and get to the Super Bowl. Yeah, we're talking about the Detroit Lions. And if it was any other logo on the side of their helmets, I might agree with it. I can't get, well, for me, 43 years of awfulness get off the page. But they are doing things the right way, and they are set up in an incredible way. Jack Campbell, he goes there. But he was not alone. We'll continue in our run through here of the NFL Hawkeye draft picks as we will go to the second round. The Lions with another selection. We will get into that. Talk about, of course, Sam LaPorta, Riley Moss, and the undrafted guys. How good of a chance do those guys have of sticking after they sign their deals? Seth Benson, Kaevon Merriweather, and Monte Pottebaum. We'll get into that as we roll through, plus a little Iowa baseball all today here. More in a moment. This is the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Today's episode of Locked On Hawkeyes is brought to you by FanDuel. Time to make a fast break to FanDuel right now during the NBA playoffs. Right now, new customers can get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. Great promotions going on. Of course, we got to see a Game 7 today. Disappointing, though Keegan Murray was very good once again and, well, shut me up from where we were a week ago when I was wondering where Keegan was. He turned it around as that series went on. Certainly looked the part You got to fill big things going forward. But that means we get Lakers, Warriors in the second round. Yeah, sign me up for that. Suns Nuggets already underway. We get the Sixers and the Celtics. They're going to get started. And game one also today with the Heat. How are they doing it? I have no clue. They keep winning games. Hey, no better place for you to bet on all the playoff action than America's #1 sportsbook. Visit FanDuel.com/locked on and get that no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's FanDuel.com/locked on. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. Trent Condon back with you again here on Locked On Hawkeyes. As always, thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. So tip 2 picks down with an Iowa perspective. 2 more to go. Thought we were going to get 5. It didn't happen. Let's get into that second round. So after Thursday night finishes up, I do my radio show Friday from Char Bar down in Kansas City and a little bit bleary eyed. I tied one on Thursday night. I was hanging out with my youngest cousin on my mom's side of the family, young Dalton, and the youngster drank me under the table. I couldn't keep up with the young buck anymore, and I was feeling it come Friday morning. That is for sure. I got up, though, raring to go. And as we were talking about things, a lot of the conversation was Matthew Mayer was still there. He had the kid from Oregon State. A lot of people really liked, had an injury plagued season for him this season. And then he had LaPorta. And the question was, well, Mayer's going to go first out of these tight ends, but where's LaPorta going to go? And I just had a sneaking suspicion that there were a couple of teams that still had LaPorta higher than Mayer because though Mayer was an incredible talent, that Notre Dame offense had all kinds of issues a year ago. They didn't have a whole lot of juice in the passing game, much like the Iowa Hawkeyes. He is still more of that inline guy. And LaPorta, he is the full combination. Does he have work to do at the NFL level as a blocker? Sure. Every tight end does. But the things that we saw Sam LaPorta do, the athleticism that he played on, what he did after a pretty big injury and coming back and playing what was a meaningless bowl game, I think said a lot. And a place like the Lions with a coach like Dan Campbell, you can absolutely see why he wanted to have a guy like Sam LaPorta in his room. What a story he was, too. LaPorta, a guy, grew up very close to Champaign. Illinois didn't want him. Believe maybe he got an offer late. It was after he was already locked and loaded to go to the University of Iowa, but Iowa was certainly out of those two the first to identify from a small town there in downstate Illinois, a kid that would become a second round NFL draft pick. And it goes to show you again what playing tight end at the University of Iowa means. And we go through obviously the TJ Hawkinsons and the George Kittles of the world and go way back and what Anthony Moiaki was and on and on and on. We can play this game, and we've seen so many good ones. Dallas Clark, and it's a long list. And it's not just those guys, but then it's that next tier of guys, the guys that carve out 4, 5, 6, 7 years in the league at the tight end position. Now, as a Hawkeye fan and somebody that cares more than anything about what the Hawkeyes do, it's incredibly frustrating when you see the recruiting world and you see Iowa involved in some of the top end prospects at the tight end position and why they can't see the light. They take guys like LaPorta, an under-recruited guy. They take George Kittle and turn him into a guy that's selected even without the statistical profile you think about, and then what George Kittle obviously has become. This game, go back to, I don't know, an Eric Jensen. You think of some of the players deeper down and what they're able to do. It's amazing. Allen Reisner, guys that carve out a career, make some money in the league. Some of them get the 4 years, get vested, and they're able to make money all throughout their lives. It is wild that Iowa, the recruiting pitch. Look, tight end is more valued at the University of Iowa than almost anywhere in the country. We put guys in the league, not just our starters, not just our studs, not just the Noah Fants and the TJ Hawkinsons. We put most everybody in the league. And why they don't have more success recruiting some of the top end tight ends that they recruit year after year. Hey, it still works. And I'll tell you, the room that they have right now at tight ends. We know about the starters and Luke Lachey and Eric All, but you throw in Addison Ostrago, what we've seen from him just in the early portions of his career. Those are 3 more guys that are going to hear their name, feels like, in the NFL draft. We'll talk about the future prospects here in the later days and weeks here. You everydayers, you got us locked and loaded every day on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast, and we greatly appreciate that. LaPorta goes at number 34, and one more selection, and that was Riley Moss. Riley Moss, a guy that saw play a ton at the high school level, saw him on track and what he was able to do, track speed. So at the time on Friday night, I was watching the ABC coverage. So it bounced around a little bit. Again, I was there Thursday, so didn't have a specific channel that I was watching because I was there and just given the feed that we were given being at the NFL draft. Friday night, bouncing around. And again, just happened. I think maybe we're getting the kids ready for bed. I can't remember the timing exactly, or maybe I just laid them down, whatever it was. And on ABC, right away, the first thing that jumps out to me is they listed as safety. Now, we went through this whole process at the Senior Bowl, and it was the lazy narrative. The white cornerback, he's got to be a safety, right? And it was a big part of the conversation with Riley Moss, but to a T, most every evaluator out there, from scout to GM, whatever range you're looking at, said no, Riley Moss, at least to start, he is going to be a cornerback. And yet, what does ABC trot out there? Safety. He's not a safety. Now, we also got to see Riley sing a little bit. Got to see that piece of it as well. He's talking about his affinity for karaoke. You know, it's just absolutely incredible. Just some of the laziness that still happens in spots like this. And if you just look at him and think, well, it's a white cornerback, there's no way he can stick. Look at the numbers. Look at what he did at his speed. This is a track guy. This is a guy that was an elite level track kid in high school. He's got the speed. He has the fluidity to be a cornerback. Will it stick? We'll see. And he's got somebody that he's going to be able to learn on, and Patrick Surtain, who's already one of the best corners, if not in the top 5 of all of NFL. That's how good he is. There's depth there. He's not going to be asked to come in right away. And I also do wonder, if there's teams, and I don't know this, if the Broncos are one of those teams that do look at him maybe as more of a slot corner, or in a way what Iowa does with their positioning with the cash. If they see him, maybe that can fill that kind of role, depending on the different defensive versatility that teams have. Great to see, though, an incredible kid, comes from a great family. He's going to be out there doing his thing, and I hope he sticks. He would be the first white cornerback to start an NFL game since Jason Sehorn over 20 years ago. That is absolutely wild. Those are the selections in the NFL draft. We got some undrafted guys. What are the chances of Seth Benson, Monte Pottebaum, and Kaevon Merriweather sticking with their teams? It's a difficult road. Can they do it? We'll hit that, plus little Iowa baseball over the weekend as we roll through on Locked On Hawkeyes. Trent Condon back with you one final time on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. So we go through the draft. We got to see Lukas Van Ness. And if you're watching closely, maybe you saw some goofiness happening at the draft party there for Lukas Van Ness. You had dad, maybe a little grabby. You had some dude jumping on top and getting pulled off of him after the selection. Looked like a very fun time and a fun family there with the Van Nesses. Let's get into the 3 undrafted guys. Start with Monte Pottebaum. Signs a deal with the Steelers. Now, here's the good news. And I get all the roster information from our lads, like our LADS. It's a great NFL resource if you're an NFL fan, giving you the depth chart, giving where guys are coming from. Really good resource there. In fact, right now, he's the only guy listed as fullback on the Steelers. Now, will they actually have a fullback? There's plenty of teams that don't. It's not the old days. Fullback is not something that is destined on all 32 of the rosters, and certainly in the active roster week in and week out. But no veterans around. Maybe a possibility. Going to be tough and at a position that's incredibly difficult. The other 2 guys, though, I think are intriguing. Seth Benson is a player that, boy, he gave it his all for the Hawkeyes, didn't he? A little bit undersized, a 6-foot sawed-off linebacker out there. I just don't know what he is. And going to a place like the Broncos, who's already stacked up. Now he'll get to go there with Riley Moss, his former teammate. He'll get to learn from Josie Jewell. Josie's going to be working, I'm sure, to try to help him out as much as possible. But an incredibly difficult path in a very deep linebacker room. In a 3-4, is he an inside guy? Is he going to be big enough? 6 foot, 232. That's tough. Outside, does he have the speed to do it? You wouldn't feel he'd quite at that level to be an outside backer in a 3-4. He's kind of that tweener, and it's going to be, I think, a really difficult one for him. On the other side, Kaevon Merriweather, how he wasn't picked. It's one of the more baffling things that we have seen, I think, in the NFL draft. A guy that was second team All American, did things. Now, I think at the NFL level, he's a tweener. He's not quite a free safety, not quite a strong safety, not big enough to be a strong safety, not the speed and versatility you look at the free. And because of that, I'm sure that's the knock, but put in the tape. Put in the tape of Kaevon Merriweather over the last 3 years and what he is, and not just what he was as a player. I've always talked about him as leadership. We talk about Jack Campbell. Kaevon Merriweather was such an important part of this team over the last 3 years. Would have just been great to hear his name called. But here's the great thing, he goes to his spot that is beautiful for him. Just three safeties on the roster right now in Tampa Bay. I'm sure they're bringing in probably some other undrafted safeties. It's not going to be Kaevon alone, but there is a real opportunity for him, not just to make the first cut, but really make a push to be part of the final roster. Kaevon Merriweather has that kind of talent, and I think he's got that kind of chance. Really good spot for him. And that's a good thing. When you get to the late round of the draft, you're into the seventh round. Yeah, hearing your name called, it's really cool. Being Mr. Irrelevant, that's awesome. Brock Purdy kind of changed the complexion of that. But for the most part, those guys that are the final pick in the draft, they don't even make the team. And so many seventh rounders don't. This is an opportunity to pick your spot, go to a place where you have a chance. If your agent is doing it right, is not just looking at that best payday, who's going to give you the top signing bonus that you can get and get that 10 grand or whatever it is. No, no, no. Where do we have the best opportunity to stick? For that, Kaevon Merriweather found a perfect fit in Tampa Bay, and I think a real chance for him to make the final roster. We wrap things up in a weird weekend for Iowa baseball. So they split the two games on Saturday. Iowa at Penn State. Penn State have been reeling a little bit. A rough start for Brody Brecht to get it going. Just could not find his command, was walking guys all over the place. Now, Penn State wasn't getting hits, but they're giving free bases. You got the walks in. Iowa was able to wait a battle back, get the victory in game one. Game two went the other way. Just a frustrating day overall. But then they don't even play on Saturday. So they don't play Friday. They decided to play a doubleheader on Saturday. They get the two games in, and then Sunday they knew it was going to be a wash. Iowa got on the plane and got back home and gets ready for their next set. You think, all right, Penn State been struggling a little bit. How impactful is that going to be to the RPI? Not real impactful. Iowa still at 38 here after the series, as the Hawkeyes now sit on the season at 27-11. Remember, those non-D1 games do not count in your NCAA tournament resume. They are now 8-6 in the Big Ten and in pretty good shape now going forward. They got Illinois State coming up this week. They have an RPI over 200. Got to take care of business on that one on Tuesday. And then Ohio State after that. The Buckeyes come to town Friday, Saturday, and Sunday in Iowa City. Then two more series after that, one with Michigan State and one with Northwestern. The Wildcats are dreadful. Michigan State's pretty good. So opportunity still there. I was still in really good position to make it back to the NCAA tournament for the first time in 5 years. And with the game off, this could impact, though, not getting in the full 3-game series. This is something that actually could impact Iowa in a negative way as it pertains to, if there was close to a tiebreaker, one last game at hand, one last chance at a victory against Penn State. Maybe they fall down the ladder a little bit when it gets to the Big Ten tournament. Does look like, though, still in really good shape for the Big Ten tournament at 8-6. Your final team in the tournament right now is Rutgers. They are 8-7. Purdue, though, just sits above them at 10-8. Michigan 9-6. Same with Nebraska. Of course, Iowa had the big series sweep against the Cornhuskers. Keep piling up those games. Michigan State will be a big one. They're second right now in the Big Ten. It'll be the Buckeyes before that and Illinois State this week. Brody Brecht, get that control back, and let's get rolling again with the Hawkeye baseball team. That'll do it for today. Thanks to our everydayers out there. Thanks for joining us every day. Coming up tomorrow, we're going to continue to look inside the portal as the portal comes to a close in football, at least when you can enter it. We'll talk about some of the rules that are out there, and is Iowa basketball doing anything? That's coming up tomorrow here on Locked On Hawkeyes. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We'll talk to you again tomorrow. Go Hawks.